Greetings. I'm Father Paul Demuth, the senior priest of the Diocese of Green Bay, and speaking to you on a weekend when the days get shorter, daylight savings is over, and the whole church is pivoting to looking at not just what's going on today, but tomorrow and forever. This past week, we just celebrated the Feast of All Saints' Day, where we held in honor all the men and women who in our lives have made such a difference. Those that we know and those we don't know. But I don't know about you, but it sure does help when I find an example that is practical and real and something like me. This past week, a friend of mine, Father John Becker, and I took a 3,500-mile road trip all the way down to New Orleans. And on our third night, we stopped in Wichita and stayed overnight there. In the morning, we decided to go downtown and to just explore. And we found the cathedral. So we got out, and the church was locked. Every entrance that we went to couldn't get in. So finally, we walked around towards the back, and there we found the entrance for people. Two big doors. We opened them, and there was a woman standing greeting us. She was a docent, and she said, "Welcome to the cathedral. This is the place where Father Emil Kapan has been buried." I did a double take because I had just finished reading his biography that a parishioner had given me. And here I was in the place that honored him. And so she told, in her own words, what I had read, a magnificent story of this young man of Kansas background who decided to become a priest. The call of God was there for him. He did what everyone does, went to the seminary, was ordained, was assigned, but very shortly after being ordained, he asked the bishop if it was possible to go and become a chaplain in the army. The bishop gave him permission, and so he joined the military, did his stint as a chaplain for 2 to 3 years, and then came back, and like myself, was assigned to various parishes. But after a few years, he got restless. And he talked to the bishop again, and he said, "Can I rejoin and become a chaplain in the army?" Well, it was right in the midst of the Korean War. The bishop said yes, and so he went into the military once again as chaplain. His group of men was assigned to active duty in Korea. And before long, he found himself in the midst of the war. He had a great sense of humor, Father Kapan had, and he did a beautiful job of keeping the morale of the troops up, of joking with them, of praying with them, hearing their confessions, celebrating Mass, sometimes on the hood of the Jeep, whatever it took. And then they got in the heat of battle. And spontaneously, whenever a man was shot down, was wounded, something in Emil triggered a response. And he'd run into enemy lines and take that person who was wounded and drag them back so that then they could be treated by the medics. Of course, sometimes he was handling a dead body. The war didn't go well, and eventually he and the men that he served were captured, and they were taken to the prisoner of war camp in Korea, which everybody knew was for all practical purposes a death sentence. But somehow, Brother Emil just kept his sense of humor, kept his positive nature, prayed with people, helped them in keeping their morale high, and aided them as many got sick. And when he had to bury them, he helped bury them. But it took a toll on him. And eventually, in the very unsanitary conditions of that camp, he got sick. Still tried to minister to people. But finally, the disease got him, and he died. A man in his 30s. You know, one of the wonderful things about our American respect for life is that bodies that are found or that are victims of war are always brought back to this country. And eventually his remains were found, and he was brought back to Wichita, his home. Now, he wasn't a braggart, and he didn't tell anything about what he did, but the soldiers that made it through the war came back and started spreading the news about this man saved us. This man helped us get through it. This man was a man of faith. And so he is buried now in a tomb in a side chapel in the cathedral in Wichita. I had the privilege of kneeling at his tomb and praying. It was really inspiring. And you know, it reflects the story in the Maccabees from our gospel this weekend, where in the Old Testament, these brothers and their mother willingly suffered torture and death on behalf of their faith. And Jesus spoke in the gospel of not just looking at what's going on now, but at the gift of life eternal. So friends, I hope you have some inspiring stories of family members, of people you know, and that you can have them as an exemplar. Father Emil Kaplan is one for me. It helps me realize who I am and what I must do. I am probably not going to be a martyr. I'm going to die an old man. But I hope in service of others. And I know that's where you are at too. So continue to serve. Continue to look at the example of the saints. God bless us all on this journey.